this is a tradition that leads to many problems, which because they don't understand always the complexities of a very complex culture. Nobody, it's in the same way, and nobody in India will say, "I will write an India book," except white people who come to India and write India books. There will always be a foreign correspondent who would live for 2 years in India and go back writing an India book. But no Indian is going to say that, because we know how complex and contradictory India is.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Leisurely Baatein. My guest today is renowned author and translator Mr. Aruni Kashyap. Aruni is currently joining us from Georgia in United States of America. He's also an assistant professor in Department of English at University of Georgia. Aruni, welcome to Leisurely Baatein. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's early morning in Athens, Georgia, and it's really lovely to talk to you.
100%. Aruni, I wanted to ask you, because your body of work spans across various genres, various categories, and you've written very prolifically both in English and Assamese. And I wanted to ask you, which among the two languages you relate better to express your emotions?
This is a very modern. I think, post-80s, post-90s question, and actually most Indians are bilingual.
Right.
In my experience, I think even your family, if they have grown up somewhere, they would probably speak a little bit of Hindi with mixtures of Urdu. I don't know where you grew up. I think most Assamese people are. Yes, absolutely. So you should definitely know Bengali and a little bit of Hindi, right? So I think most Indians are bilingual. Assamese people are Assamese. We speak a little bit of Bengali. My parents are fluent Bengali speakers. I'm a fluent Bengali reader. I can't speak Bengali because that's another story why I can't speak Bengali very well. And my father also knows a little bit of Karbi language. Some of my friends know Boro when they have grown up in Boro areas. The default experience of the Indian writer or the Indian person is that we live in multiple languages. We inhabit multiple languages, multiple linguistic cultures. For me, growing up reading Desh, Anandalok, Prantik, and Goryoki was very common because these are languages that found way to our homes. Right. And not just Bengali writers from India, but from Bangladesh as well. Right. We also had read Bengali writers from southern Assam, and books translated to Bengali. So for me, actually, I don't know how to answer that question. But I think because my most honest answer is that I feel comfortable writing in language my character asks me to write in that. Right. So I can't ever imagine The House with 1,000 Stories in Assamese written by me, because if I have to write it in Assamese, I can't write it from Pablo's perspective. And the book is from Pablo's perspective, a 17-year-old young boy. He is very MTV, Star World influence, grows up in an upper middle class family in Gaunti, but roots in the village. And he's also that his language is influenced by American lingo. His language is influenced by like British English, because he still uses you in colors and favors, and but if I have to write a book in Assamese, I can't imagine this book in Assamese. So I can imagine the story from the voice of maybe Oholla Jathai, because I think she's a very compelling character.
Very powerful.
Or maybe
I've just started reading the book. I've just started
everybody's
the book, and very
her.
powerful. Someone you have always seen in every family, in eastern part of India.
Absolutely.
A very powerful woman with a lot of control, authority, and
absolutely. I mean, you caught it right. Absolutely. I mean, mostly in 19th century Bangla novels, you will see a character, or novels set in 19th century Bengal or early 20th century, you will see a character like Oholla Jathai, and you see that in every household, almost in Assam and Bengal, definitely. So what I'm trying to say is that, for me, I have to hear the voice of the character very clearly. And when I know that I know the story and I know this character very intimately, and I'm convinced by the voice, I start writing. And that language, when I start writing, is decided by the character. So if the character is comfortable with English, then the story will be written in English. So it's actually the story, the plot, and the character who demands the language for me. It happens in a very imaginative, subconscious space that I cannot actually pin down. It's never has been a conscious choice, which is one of the reasons after 2013, I waited 7 years to publish another English book. In the meantime, I wrote 3 Assamese novellas and a novel in Assamese. It was mainly because the characters that I was inhabiting, or the characters who were living with me, they just made sure that I wrote in Assamese.
Right. No, very well said, because, sometimes I've also, seen people wanting to write, a regional story in a foreign language, more to also distribute the culture. And I've seen, I've heard from some of my friends who are authors as well. That's also something that happens with them. I don't know if that's, that's a thought that you subscribe to.
That's very interesting, but I don't think that's my job. I'm a storyteller, and I want to tell stories. And the cultural elements, because they are part of the quotidian.
Right.
It's not because I want to inform somebody about Assamese culture. My question for me has always been like this: if I write this book in Assamese, will these cultural elements be there? If that question is yes, then I always include it, because what should not be there in an Assamese book, shouldn't be there in an English book, because it's a story that we are telling. So why will I say Diwali # Festival of Lights when I write in English?
Right.
I won't do that if I wrote in Bangla, Hindi, or Assamese, right? Like Sunil Ganguly will never do that. Diwali # Festival of Lights, and then go on to tell the story. Right. So I think the question is, for me, always the story is the most important thing. And there are people, I think, who want to provide some kind of information and education for the reader. I think those are very self-conscious projects, and I feel that deep fiction actually emerges from a meditative space, and the self-conscious projects are not inferior, but I'm saying that they emerge from a different space that I do not find exciting artistically.
Sure, 100%. Aruni, share with us a little bit about your earlier life, where you grew up, and what motivated or triggered you, to become an author.
My parents both were. My parents actually are both writers. My mother is no more, but she was a novelist, and she wrote short stories, and she wrote 2 novels. And one novel was not published as a book, but came out in a magazine, special issue. My father is still a very active writer. He's a columnist. He has written books that I have lost count of. So obviously, I grew up in a household with books. There were books all over the place, and I read in both Assamese and Bengali, and in English. Because my mother's PhD was on Bongyo Nobojagron and Assamese literature, Bengal Renaissance and 19th century Assamese literature. Mm-hmm. She also researched a lot on romantic poets, Assamese romantic poets, and compared them with British romantic poets. There's a whole cluster of poems in Assamese about birds and this that kind of mimic the romantic tradition in Britain. Right. So there are Bengali books, there are Assamese books, Hindi books, there are books all over the place. We had no space to keep books, So I grew up reading books. So I think that was one big trigger, if that answers your question. Right. The other thing is that also that, I had my parents' friends were writers, so there were many people in the house always who were writers who talked about books. I think that meant that sent a signal to the childhood, to the child who I was, that hey, books are really cool, because your parents are constantly talking about it. So I think those surroundings, I think, inspired me that to pick up the pen. But I also want to say that it was never a conscious choice, because I started writing stories when I was very young, about 9 or 10, and my mother used to correct them. I still actually have a lot of those, very silly stories, but I kind of go back to that Aruni of 10, 11, 15 years old who wrote those stories. Right. So I think it was both because of the surroundings, my parents, and also because I loved reading from a very young age. I was reading adult books when I was 12, which caused a lot of tension in the house because they were worried about me. Yeah, and I read mostly literary fiction, so I think that's why I write a lot of literary fiction. But I do want to write a horror novel or a thriller or a fantasy someday. But having said that, I think my childhood, it was the trigger. Without my parents, without the books around me, I probably wouldn't have written. But at the same time, we have to say one thing, reading books is not something that you cannot make a conscious decision. It's very hard to make a conscious decision to read and write books and talk about books. It's a life choice. It's a choice of a lifetime. So if you don't like it, if you don't enjoy it, it's not possible to fake it. It's going to be full of agony. And people often talk about how terrible their writing the writing hours are, how hard it is. And I don't know why they do that. I think maybe they're not operating from a space of enjoyment. Even if I write for 5 hours and I have to delete that page 2 days later, that manuscript 2 days later, I really enjoy those 5 hours and I do not regret the deletion, because I really like writing. I love writing. People like playing football and de-stressing, or going for a run. I like to write and de-stress, or I like to write and just have fun.
Right. Very well said. I think those words would certainly resonate with many aspiring authors who are viewing this episode of ours, and especially for me, still taking baby steps and learning the process and art of writing. Aruni, your writing has deep fragrance of Assam, and you live in the United States. Do you ever feel lonely or a stranger living and working in a foreign country?
Yes, absolutely. But I I have to say that I have always been a lonely child. Even when I was young, and I used to like staying alone. I don't know how to use the word lonely. I like solitude a lot. I'm most lonely when I'm with people who I don't connect to. I could be living with somebody, all the time, and if that person is if that person is not connected to me, I'm going to be the loneliest person. But I can live in a house for months without anybody and going for walks. I can live in a lonely city if you give me the books, if you give me a good internet connection. I mean, without an internet connection, I'll survive. I have lived like that in the village for an entire month. People go away to the farm in my grandma's house in the morning and they come back in the evening. So I'm alone in the house most of the time with my grandmother or an old relative who stay in the house and reading books. So when you are reading books, when you're writing books, you are never really lonely because you are with characters who are always hovering around you, telling you stories. It is the most loneliest to live with somebody who you have lost the connection to or who you don't connect to. So I can live in a big house with 5 roommates, but if I don't like them, I'll be very lonely. Or if they don't like me, I'll be very lonely. Or they may like me, but we don't connect. I'll be very, very lonely. So I'm most lonely of being lonely with people. I'm not scared of solitude. Right. I'm scared of loneliness when I'm with people. And that's very annoying and that's very painful.
Right, I'm sure. Aruni, what I wanted to lead on to this particular question is there a process that you follow for writing?
Yes, I write a lot and I delete a lot, I'm not scared of the delete button. Margaret Atwood said that the delete button is your best friend. I think nobody has ever said it, in better ways. Or maybe she was talking that the waste paper bin was your best friend. I have learned music, so I used to learn music. Just like in the East, people learn music, right? I think Bengalis, a lot of them like Rabindra Sangit or classical music.
Yeah.
So my mother just thought that my voice is lovely and mellifluous, and she decided to teach me music. So so this is what most Eastern mothers also think about their children, by the way. So my son and daughter, they are such good singers and going to become the next, Rafi, Lata Mangeshkar, or Parveen Santana, if you're a bit.
Yes. I've heard her many times in Kolkata at the Westland Music Conference.
Yeah, exactly. So my mother has decided that I'm the next, big sensation in the singing world. And when I was probably in class 1, 9 years, 8 years old, I don't remember, but I remember buying the harmonium and all. So the singing practice have actually, I learned singing for the next 8 to 10 years, and has taught me, and I still love singing for fun, but in my own house. It has taught me that, if you don't get a song right, you just have to write it again and again. Sing it again and again, and I'm saying writing by mistake, as you can see. If you don't get a story right, you just write it again and again. For example, last month I wrote a whole novel of 36,000 words. I just wanted to have fun and write a ghost story, because I've never written a horror novel. And by the time I ended it, I knew that I will have to delete all these 36,000 words. But it gave me a lot of joy that I know the story's nooks and corners now. And next time, 2-3 months later, when I go back to revising that book, I will know where exactly to start and what to avoid. And I'm not going to borrow any chunks of words or passages from that other manuscript. But it gave me a lot of knowledge about a story that I had no clue about. I just followed my instinct. So I think writing is very similar to athletics, music, painting, where you just keep doing it until you get it right.
Right.
Some writing, a poem or a short story, because they are shorter forms, they kind of emerge fully made, but also because you have been thinking about that story or that poem subconsciously or consciously for a very, very long time. So my process is to wake up in the morning and put in 2 hours of writing, even though that may not be useful. But if I don't do that, I'm a very cranky person. Like you don't want to be around me. I'll be snapping at you, I'll be cranky. I'll be blaming, the whole world that it's terrible. So I try to, I try to sort of put in the 2 hours of writing. Even if it is 1 hour, I'm happy. And I do it, and I don't look at writing as work. Another thing I would like to sort of say about the process, if there it is that I look at writing as meditation, as a kind of therapy. I don't look at it as work. I've never looked at it as work. I have looked forward to writing. When I was young, my parents would find me writing stories, and they would seize the book away from me, because I'm supposed to do well in my studies, right? What if, what will happen if I write Golpo? So they used to say that. There are many times in my board exams, my mother and father, they would take away all my notebooks, threaten to sort of, never give me back. But they would never say we would destroy them, because they were both writers. But they did not understand. I don't know if they understood, but I felt that they did not understand this. That I'm doing this because it gives me so much happiness, and they wanted me to do well in the board exams. Otherwise, I would never get a seat, in India and in a good college. So but I'm saying that the process is all about that. To wake up every day, write, delete button is your best friend, and revise extensively, and marinate the thoughts. Those I think a lot before I start writing. Something that is good, I have thought a lot about it actually, and it is good also because I've been working at my craft every day. So the practice of writing every day does help. If I don't have a long-standing project, what I do is I look for prompts, in the internet, or I actually have a lot of prompts anyway because I teach creative writing. So I give myself one, and I start writing. So, yeah, that's it.
No, phenomenal. I think I was just listening and absorbing, as a student. Very well explained, Aruni. Aruni, your body of work also constitutes of a lot of very good translation of Assamese work into English. I wanted to understand from you, what is more difficult for you? I mean, is it translating or writing your own ideas, your own novels?
Actually, translation is a more intellectual exercise for me. So as a result, I don't enjoy doing it. I mean, I'm an academic, so I'm not anti-intellectual, but at the same time, it is more brain labor than heart labor. For me, writing is heart labor. Like if I kill a character, I get upset for multiple days. But if I have to read, like if I have to teach like Gayatri Spivak, it's brain labor for me. So for my students, I read the essay, and I make notes. It's very, very sort of structured way of studying. So it's a different kind of labor, which I like doing because it gives me knowledge, but I don't 100% enjoy doing reading through my brain constantly. Like it's a very intellectual exercise. So translation is like that for me. But at the same time, I value that. It's not that I don't value it, and that's why I do it and spend time on it. I value that primarily because I think that traditionally stories from Northeast have been constantly told by people from other spaces, people who are not from the Northeast, people who have seized our stories. If you look at the colonial times, in the 19th century and in the early 20th century, there are all these British colonizers and officers who write about Assam, Nagaland, and that tradition that they inaugurated continues till today, where you will see journalists from the rest of India who are curious about Northeast, and that curiosity is genuine, but they continue to come and tell our stories for a larger Indian audience or a larger global audience. This is a tradition that leads to many problems, which because they don't understand always the complexities of a very complex culture. Nobody, it's in the same way, and nobody in India will say, I will write an India book, except white people who come to India and write India books. There will always be a foreign correspondent who would live for 2 years in India and go back writing an India book. But no Indian is going to say that, because we know how complex and contradictory India is. In the same way, Northeast is far more complex and contradictory. Nobody ever should try to write a Northeast book, or a book that tries to explain this. So what I'm trying to say is that one of the biggest reasons why people from the Northeast face racism or problems and different kinds of prejudices is because of these stories that have been told by British colonizers, by outsiders, and also by native informants. Basically, native informants are those kind of people who tell the stories about Northeast or about underrepresented region in a way that is palatable to the larger powerful forces, and the powerful forces also feel as if they are doing the right thing by actually making these native informants write about the Northeast, write about the complex politics of Northeast, but they are actually mirroring the desires and the thought processes of the powerful colonizing forces. So they're writing basically in the same tradition, and that is why they're getting a space. So I think translation is a tool that can actually counter these things, because when you are writing in Assamese or Bengali for an audience in Tripura, or Kokborok for an audience in Tripura, or Bengali in Silchar, you are not actually thinking about an audience outside the Northeast. So these writers are completely devoid of an audience outside the Northeast, and they are completely untouched by these racist tradition of writing. So by translating these writers, we can actually counter many of the misconceptions about underrepresented areas. And by giving these writers a voice and a platform, we can actually but we can actually challenge the dominant discourse about a very complex region. If you Google, stories about Assam today, you will see that they are not written by people who are from Assam. These are mostly people who have parachuted, and lived there for a few months, for a few weeks, and written for a broader audience. I think publications, presses, agents, literary agents, they have a responsibility to actually nurture and choose people from these regions to tell their stories, because we know how complex and multi-layered our stories are. And I think translation is a very important activity because of that. And I do it because even though it is not something that I supremely enjoy doing, I do it as a sense of responsibility.
Very well said. Very well explained. Aruni, what do you think is the future of regional literature? And I ask this because as just like, taking baby steps into the world of publishing, like a couple of books which have been published before, one's coming up. What I have experienced is that there's a tremendous amount of effort that goes into distribution and marketing, in the discovery of the author. And my question therefore is more from that perspective, especially in the future of regional literature, young authors who needs to be motivated and distributed and discovered.
If I have understood your question properly, well, I think that the regional literature always has a future. It has a wonderful past,
Yes.
because regional literature goes back for such a long period. Assamese literature starts in the 5th century. So because it is wonderful past, it still flourishes despite multiple violent attacks of colonialism, British colonialism, or other kinds of linguisticalism. I think it's going to thrive, but I think that English and capitalist forces are definitely sort of corroding that space quite a bit. When it comes to regional writing, it comes down to the idea of market. I think a space like, say, the Bengali writers, who write in Bengal. Suppose Sunil Ganguly has a far bigger readership than any Indian English writer, actually. I wouldn't compare him to, say, in terms of readership, maybe Amitav Ghosh maybe has slightly more readers, But say Sunil Ganguly or Asha Puna Devi or Samres Mazumdar, they are read like far wider in terms of number, because Bengali is read in Bangladesh as well, and Tripura, in southern Assam. Assamese people read Bangla, and the Bengali diaspora is very large, both from Bangladesh and India.
Right.
So as a result, I think, but a regional writing space like, say, Assamese is very small. I think Bengali speakers would be definitely more than 200 million. Assamese speakers are 20 million. Out of which a small percentage will read and buy books. So that makes a very sort of imbalance. But even though I feel that it's the responsibility of individuals in these spaces to invest money and create structures. I don't know the nitty-gritties of Bangla literature, but I have friends who write novels, but they talk about getting royalties and good advances. I have a friend who actually got 1 lakh rupees advance for her novel, to be published by Ananda Publishers, which is unheard of in Assam. It will be like that. Maybe one author would get it,
Right.
And so I think these are concerns that should be resolved at a regional level for regional literature's upliftment, and the writers, intellectuals, publishers should come together in these regional spaces to actually support regional writing. And I don't know if a large publisher going there and starting a printing press is the best solution. I don't know. But I do know that one thing, that for Assamese literature to thrive, to become a profitable business, publishers will have to pump money into the business. Authors should be getting advances. There should be proper contracts. Like, I have written an Assamese book, no contract was signed, and I know this is the same for the topmost writer in Assam to the youngest writer, to the lowermost writer in Assam. In terms of experience and seniority, if at all it matters. No contract. Oh, I'll publish your book and give you royalties. If the publisher is honest and good, they'll give you royalties, and otherwise you don't get it. There is no contract. There is nothing. It's just an honor code that they follow. And so we don't know what's happening. I don't know if my book is selling. There is no Nielsen book scan making a survey and finding out how many books are sold. There are no Amazon ratings. Nothing. So there is no kind of. No, I have not seen a lot of book promotion of Assamese writing as well. So I think more money should be pumped into regional writing by regional players in order to sort of this space to thrive. But I think translation will also help. I think the success of an Assamese, Bengali, or a Hindi writer in the wider space encourages people to actually sort of support writers in these spaces. So translations, good translations published by responsible publishers in responsible ways will definitely go a long way, in helping regional writing.
100%. We are almost towards the end of the episode. I wanted to ask you one final question, which I've been waiting to ask, is what has been the most difficult book or novel or piece of writing that you've written, and why?
I haven't written like 20 novels to be able to answer that, but I would say that the most difficult and challenging book was definitely my first book, and I'll tell you why. In my early drafts, I had done so much research on the violence that happened in Assam that a lot of it was very painful and gut reaction, and I included a lot of information, concrete facts about human rights violations committed by the state forces, the violence committed by the insurgents, and how the common people were kind of trapped in between, basically. And I wanted to tell the story of these common people, like who were not interested probably in the insurgency, they just were just caught in between, and they didn't have clear loyalties, honestly, they just wanted to live their life. So it was very difficult because a lot of it happened to people in my family, in my extended family. I talked to them, I interviewed them. Talking to people who are survivors of torture was very hard and very difficult. Reading about entire families being bombed while they were sleeping was not easy, especially when you know that, these are your people, these are people who speak your language, these are people who know other people who you may know. So it was very hard emotionally to go through all of these facts and shift through it. So for me, for a time, there was this zeal in me that, I must include all of these facts so that people know what terrible things were done to these common people, and I'm the crusader of justice. That was my attitude when I was writing the first drafts. But when I kept it aside and I realized that this is not what my novel is supposed to do. I'm not a historian, and I don't want to be. I'm not an anthropologist, and neither was trying to be. I'm not a cultural theorist. I'm not informing anybody about my culture. I have to honor the desires of the characters and the conflicts, as William Faulkner said, the conflict of the human heart. And that should be the foreground of the book. And everything else kind of then fell into place. So I took out a lot of the facts and kept it in the background. If somebody is interested, the internet is a free space. Go and research. I have talked about in interviews. I've written an op-ed for The Hindu about what period the novel is set in. You're free to go and sort of read up. But my book is not the answer to provide you about the history, politics, culture of Assam. My book is about what it means to live in Assam and what it means to love in Assam.
Fantastic. Aruni, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed, this conversation. Absolutely, engrossed as a student as I kept, listening to you. I wish you all the very best and hope to, meet you in person sometime soon when you have the next safe trip to India in these times. So stay safe, stay happy, and thank you once again.
Thank you, Subhadip, and you're being very humble. I'm looking forward to read your book as well, and I will surely pick it up after this conversation. And thank you so much for inviting me to your program. And it's a delight to sort of meet you like this.
Thank you so much.